the moment that we are day 2 in our organization, that's when it all starts to go to hell. So how do you live like every day is day 1? What is day 1? Day 1 is the hunger. It's the passion. It's never forgetting where you've come from. It's humility. You know, it's the true entrepreneurial spirit. And we forget that Procter, Gamble, you know, they were people. They were actual people, and they get abbreviated, TBWA, all of these companies that end up with abbreviations. Each abbreviation, each letter stood for a person. And it's that fighting spirit. If you can somehow figure out how to keep that spirit alive, even when that person has passed on, those are the companies that keep their heads above water.
Hay personas que hablan de la importancia de adaptarse al cambio y hay quienes toman la iniciativa y lideran a sus equipos frente a estos cambios. Y hay quienes están generando esos cambios, visualizándolos, entendiéndolos e incluso promoviéndolos antes de que estos sucedan. Este es el caso de mi gran invitado el día de hoy. Yo soy Efraín Mendicuti y he creado este espacio para conversar con algunos de los más destacados líderes de pensamiento, negocios, educación, salud y cultura sobre su trayectoria, lecciones y mejores prácticas y compartir así con todos nosotros su pensamiento, estrategias y recomendaciones para hacer en nuestras vidas de lo cotidiano algo extraordinario. Esto es Entre Mentores DLC. Cuando algunos seguían empujando la publicidad tradicional, él ya hablaba de la vida después de los spots de 30 segundos. Cuando algunos comenzaban a intentar entender las plataformas sociales, él ya hablaba de la importancia de unirte a la conversación. Cuando otros comenzaban a hablar de servicio a cliente como un servicio más allá de la postventa, él ya nos había dicho que teníamos que voltear el funnel, y cuando algunos comenzaban a comentar sobre los nuevos retos de las organizaciones, él ya nos compartía cómo salvarlas y dejar de apestar. Conocido por su agudo punto de vista e irreverente forma de explicar las cosas, mi invitado hoy ha dedicado su vida profesional a ayudar a cientos de organizaciones a entender cómo enfrentar mejor los retos que la transformación digital nos presentan. Acompáñenme a aprender del autor de múltiples libros, entre los que destacan Flip the Funnel y Build to Suck, The Inevitable Demise of Corporation and How to Save It, el cofundador de HMS Beagle y fundador de Jaffe LLC, y host de Corona TV, el extraordinario Joseph Jaffe. So, I heard that Gangnam Style is your walking music.
Thank you. I love that. I love that music. And by the way, why is it my walk on? Because I feel like it's kind of on brand. It's not what you would expect. It speaks to the irreverent part of my personality, and you know what, it gets people excited talking from the get-go. So thank you. I have a big smile on my face now.
Yeah, I was watching a recent episode of Corona TV with so many great guests that you had that day, and you were talking about the walking music at the beginning. And that's where I learned that you like to use Gangnam Style. So, can you believe it's been 11 years since we last talked?
Wow, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. 11
years. Yeah, back then you had just released Join the Conversation. And actually...
Isn't this funny? By the way, I'm showing the book, and the cover of the book with Join the Conversation is now my background that you can see right now, which is actually my streaming show, Corona TV. Talk about coming full circle. And the reason, I had a huge fight with Wiley, my publisher, over this book, because I wanted the cover to be, I think it was called the 1,000 Blogger Project. And these are all real bloggers. This is the conversation. And I wanted a book called Join the Conversation to reflect the real conversation. And so isn't it funny? It may be 11 years, but we just pick up where we left it off. That is what I think the true test of a relationship or friendship.
Absolutely, my friend, and it's amazing. You're right. It's full circle. Like, it's just. And I was telling in the intro that before, when a lot of people were starting to talk about, the importance and the impact of social media, you were already sharing your ideas around joining the conversation and how you have foreseen so many changes, and being part of the group of people who have led that transformation. But before we get into that, I think that you have your story, your life story begins way before that. And you have an amazing life story. So why don't we start at the beginning and you tell us a little about who Joseph Jaffe is and what's the path that you've walked that has led you to this point in your career and in life?
Well, the funny thing is, my interesting story is I finished high school in South Africa. My plan at that point is to go to Israel and just go tour there, on a program where I would just spend a year in Israel and probably drink too much and most likely smoke too much and just be 17, 18. And then I fall off a wall. Trying to break into my friend's house. He had gone clubbing. He had overslept. I was going to pick up my mother from the airport. And I was actually driving at that time illegally without a license. And I would have been able to drive to the airport. She would have been angry with me. So I thought, let me bring with a friend who had a license. But long story short, I fall off this wall. I break my elbow in 3 places. I break my shoulder in 2 places and dislocate it. I spend 3 weeks in the hospital. I end up with pins, wires, surgery. I spend my birthday in hospital, New Year in hospital, my final results in hospital, and my whole life changes. I don't go to Israel. I end up going to university. I end up registering for a BSc pharmacy because I thought I would become a pharmacist. I then go from BSc pharmacy to BSc computer science to business science computer science to business science finance and eventually to business science marketing, all in the space of about 1 year. And you know what? When I hit marketing, I just hit it. I opened up this book by Philip Kotler, and I knew that I was a marketer. And it just, my blood coursed, energy just came into my body. And I went from just, getting average grades to basically top of the class medals, dean's list over the course of the last 2.5 years at college. And you know what? I learned something about marketing. You either have it or you don't. You either get it or you don't. And that was the beginning of a crazy ride that then just accelerates through working at a company called Nando's Chicken Land in marketing to coming to the US in 97, working for a number of ad agencies, going out on my own and writing 5 books, starting 3 companies, and as of the pandemic, which I know we'll get to, completely pivoting and reinventing myself. I reinvented myself in 2020. And before we even get there, let me tell you, talk about full circle. When I came to the US in 1997, I don't know how much, when I'm finished with this, you can tell me how much you even knew about any of this. When I come to the US in 1997, I think that maybe I'll do an MBA because it's the only way I can get a visa and kind of establish myself. I go to Kellogg for an interview. Kellogg in Chicago, Northwestern University. I figure, let me go to Kellogg because it has a great reputation in marketing, and Philip Kotler teaches there. I actually go to one of his lectures. I sit at the back. I introduce myself to him, and he kind of looks at me like he's ready to call security because I'm like a fanboy, right? Years go by. It's about almost the time that you and I met, but it's about 2007, 2008. I keynote at a seminar in Caracas in Venezuela. There are only 2 presenters, myself and Philip Kotler. The 2 of us ended up connecting. We had drinks. We got to know one another. We go in a car, an armored vehicle, with security with like semi-automatic guns. And I'm trying to make conversation with them, and I say, by the way, what's your next gig after Philip and myself? And they say, tomorrow night we're with Maroon 5. Now I will say there's one final part to this story, this crazy story. On my birthday, which is December 24th, I'm turning 50. And on my show, Corona TV, I have Seth Godin and Philip Kotler as my guests. How crazy is that?
I'm not going to miss that one, definitely. Congratulations in advance. It's just a few days.
Yeah, I mean, it's and that's the thing. I was meant to be in South Africa, celebrating. Now I'm here in my home office doing a show, and quite frankly, doing what I love.
Wow. It's incredible how things end up working out, and it's like when you just kind of, follow through and keep doing what you love doing and keep working on your stuff. Challenges are going to arise. Things are going to change. Sometimes we will not like what's going on, of course, but if you just follow through and keep working on your craft and doing the things that you love, it's really great how everything works out in the end.
And you know what? It's also relative, right? Even the definition of works out in the end is what is important, what matters. Nobody came into 2020 expecting any of this. Yeah. And suddenly, we would say we wish you health, happiness, success, joy, love. But we realize now the one thing that we cannot take for granted, the one thing that money cannot buy, the one thing that is more important than anything else is our health. And so like working out in the end, even in my soliloquy today, when I start my show, I do a 3-minute little monologue. And I basically say, there's that old cliche that says, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, today is a gift. That's why they call it the present. And I basically say, act every day as if it was your only day and as if it was your last day. Hopefully it isn't, but act like it is your last day. And to me, that is the definition of things working out.
I really like that. And are you reading my script or something? Because it's like you're already going into the questions that I was going to ask.
You know about privacy and webcams. I've been reading your scripts for like months now.
So last time that we saw each other was in Mexico City. It was 11 years ago. You had just released, joined the conversation. And I remember I was with Google back then, and we had organized a presentation, a keynote with you, and you talked to a group of our clients back then. And I think that the year before that, you came for IAV, for the IAV conference at some moment, and with Life After the 30-second spot, I remember. And so ever since then, you've been, kind of riding this wave of change and being part of the generation of people who has led the change in a whole industry, and not just the advertising industry. I would say that in many other industries as well. And, back then, we were discussing some of the changes that had already gone on, which, by the way, pale in comparison to the changes that had happened in the last decade or so. You were talking about how expectations and plans change from one moment to the other, and how we need to adapt, especially in the times that we're living in right now. But some of other changes, you can at least try to control and plan for them. And what changes since we last talked have been like the most important changes in your career? I know that in the public speaking circuit, there have been many changes, of course. As an author, you've written, I love Build to Suck. I think it's a different approach to what you were writing before. So why did you decide to change that and go right about that and not just marketing like before?
Well, it's funny. The way that I even position Corona TV is These are just little appetizers, because for some people they'll be thinking, what is Corona TV? But we'll get there. But I say it's a show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing. So you can almost see this interesting change in me, which is I will always be a marketer. I love marketing. Marketing is in my veins. I mean, you heard that from the story earlier. But I'm distancing myself a little bit from what marketing has become in order to use that perspective to help to figure out how to fix marketing. But going back to what you said about built to suck, what I realized is if the corporation dies, then brands die. And if brands die, then marketing dies. And what I kind of realized or recognized is that the corporation, this dynasty, this civilization, this beast that is the corporation as we know it, has outlived its usefulness, which, by the way, is the same thing that I said with the 30-second spot, which is, you can almost see my career is something which is, I like to, Wayne Gretzky often said, and I'm definitely not comparing myself to Wayne Gretzky, the great one. I'm just saying he has always been an inspiration. He always said, I never was where the puck was. I was always skating to where the puck was going to be. And so for me, I've always kind of looked at 12 to 18 months, never too far forward and never too much in front of my face. And what I've witnessed is two things with respect to change. One is first mover advantage counts. It always counts. It always will count. Two is when everybody catches up, they generally destroy the thing. They dilute the thing. There is no more competitive advantage when everyone is doing and acting and singing from the same sheet music. There is just vanilla. There is no differentiation. And so in this particular case, I was able to see where everything was going. And it's funny because when you actually look at the cover of the book, there is what I call the corporate apocalypse. And I show companies like Kodak and Blockbuster and Toys R Us that are like on the scrap heap. But there was also Sears and JCPenney that have since actually fallen by the wayside. So for me, what I wanted to do is really connect with the strategic side to me and write a business book, but a business book that had marketing in it. And so that's why I kind of stepped a little bit away from saying, hey, the next big thing in marketing is ... because of that insight, which is, Jay Chiat once said, let's see how big we get before we suck. Jim Collins wrote a book called Built to Last. And I was saying, wait a second, many of the companies that he wrote about have actually fallen by the wayside. And Jim said, not every company will be a visionary company forever. And so this is the proof that after Built to Last comes Built to Suck. Because, and this was my insight, no man, no company, no civilization can cheat the sands of time. We all have an expiration date. We all have a life cycle. It is as inevitable as the sun rising and setting. So what we need to do, that is not a depressing idea. It is actually a liberating one that says when you can accept and embrace your mortality, that's when you are truly alive. And that's when you get to live. And one of the things, I didn't even write this in the book, but it came out afterwards, is I said there should be term limits on corporations, after which they should either be, dissolved, as in literally closed down, dissected, broken up, or disrupted. So there is a blueprint there that is absolutely not about death, but about rebirth, I think.
That's really interesting. And I think it was Jeff Bezos who told his team in a letter, and I think you mentioned this also in I don't remember if it's part of the book or if I heard you talk about this, about how Bezos told his team, like, sometime Amazon is going to end as well. So let's see how great we can become before that happens.
It was actually for me like validation It's on the inside cover of the book. And he says, one day we will go bankrupt. And then he says to employees, your job is to delay that for as long as possible. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, and by the way, I mean, just look at what's going on right now with Facebook or Amazon or Google, with antitrust, with government, mm-hmm. Stepping in, and in some respects, actually rightly so. I've never been a fan of government stepping in, but these companies are too big at the moment. It is damn near impossible. It is, even though I write about the entrepreneurial revolution, it's much harder right now. And the dirty little secret is that the statistics when it comes to new businesses and small businesses and startups, it's not flourishing right now because it's really, really hard to grow and build and evolve without one of the big five playing nice. And why should they? So these are very, and by the way, all of that is clearly pre-COVID.
Yeah, of course. So how does a company, and let's one thing that I love about, one thing that Mitch says a lot is, let's move from the Apples and the Facebooks and focus on smaller companies and organizations. How can a company delay, as Bezos put it, how can a company delay its demise for the longest time possible?
Well, in Built to Suck, I came up with what I call the 4 horsemen of the corporate apocalypse, because every good apocalypse needs 4 horsemen, and the 4 were size. Again, the thesis is that companies have become too big, too siloed, too political, too dysfunctional, too conservative. The second is age. And again, with age comes sickness, but more importantly, stubbornness, being set in your ways, cranky, not. The third is being a public company, which is the kiss of death, because it's short-termitis, which is a chronic disease. It's like a ST. It's actually, I came up with a concept, not an STD, but a CTD, a corporate transmitted disease, is short-termitis. And then the fourth one is culture. And so in there is some of the solution. Then there is one of the boldest ideas I've ever come up with in my career, called heresy. Embrace your heresy. What if you fired yourself? What if you slaughtered the cash cow? What if you fired your customer? What if you left money on the table? What if you funded your competitor? What if you did a reset? I came up with all these heresies. What if you basically put yourself out of business? And every one of them has already come true. From, Andy Grove firing himself at Intel, to REI closing on Black Friday, to Netflix closing down their DVDs when they hit their billionth DVD. Every single one of them has basically come true. And then finally in the book, I have my kind of table, my growth, my 4 pillars of growth, which is digital disruption, customer obsession, no more customer service, customer experience, customer centricity, customer obsession, obsession. The third is talent resurrection, because if we cannot win the war for talent, we're dead, and one of the things I say there is ban the employee. We should not ever call our talent employees. We should turn them into entrepreneurs. And then the fourth one, which is actually a relatively they're all bold, at least my interpretations of them are bold. Like, for example, with digital disruption, I say, everyone said COVID has ushered in the era of digital transformation. And I say that is absolutely not true. All it's done is digital catch-up.
Absolutely.
digital acceleration, digital catch-up. The fourth one is what I call corporate citizenship. So there are bold ideas such as, conscious capitalism, the evolution of capitalism, being a corporate citizen, actually recognizing that the role of a business is not just about short-term shareholder return on investment. It is about return on all shareholders, on all constituencies. And this is, these are thoughts that have been echoed by the Business Roundtable. So in everything I just said is part of the answer, and then just to be a little bit irreverent, one thing I say is the key to success is to suck less. Just suck a little less. that, that gives you a little bit of a head start.
I love that. If you get to suck a little less every day, you will manage. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's I want to double click in what you said about the four horsemen of the corporate. How do you say it? The apocalypse.
Corporapocalypse. I always say, don't say corporapocalypse 3 times fast, especially if you've been drinking.
So, I agree with you. You mentioned one is age, and becoming of age. And I've been lucky enough to be part of the startup of amazing organizations when they opened their operations here in Mexico. So I was part of the founding team of Google in Mexico a few years ago, back when we met. Then I was lucky enough to be 6 years ago part of the founding team of Twitter here in Mexico, for the commercial operation. And it's very interesting to see how, when you first start and it's just, 3 people, 4 people, 10, 16, everybody's doing everything. And it's like, everybody's hungry to make things happen, and you're really scrappy, and you just, you get the ball rolling. And then as you begin to grow and start celebrating some successes, it's like those successes become your biggest challenges and your biggest traps, because then politics start to happen. The business starts growing, more people start coming in, roles are more defined. And then it's like, you get into the short term of results, and you're no longer thinking about going the long way, but rather just reporting the numbers for the next quarter. And it's...
I mean, the thing is, there's an old saying, which is chief marketing officers got to where they got to not by managing risk, but by mitigating it. And we could talk about risk for an hour. Risk is relative. There can be what's called calculated risks, right? What is risky to you may not be risky to me. But what happens is, the bigger, the fatter the organization, the fat cats, the C-suite, it's all about defending your equity, your legacy, your retirement, as opposed to, moving forward. It's all about, that defensive posture. And that's why a lot of the rot of, why culture is so important. But there's another thing as well, which is, what I've learned in my career. Politics can happen in an organization of 2 people, quite frankly, and that's the thing. I actually saw, I was listening to a podcast with Madeleine Albright. I think she was being interviewed. I think it was Tim Ferriss. And she actually said the origins of the word politics, it's actually a language. It's almost like an operating system for how communication and business is done within government. That is what is called politics or politicking. It's a special way to talk, to act, steps, procedures. So politics itself can actually find its way into any organization of any size. That quote from Jay Scheid, let's see how big we can get before we go bad, before we suck. So the steps that have to be implemented is, let's go back to Amazon for a second. Amazon's main building is called Day One. Yeah. Jeff Bezos's first memo to shareholders is called Day One. In that memo, he actually writes the phrase customer obsession. He says, we are customer obsessed. I didn't know that when I came up with the concept of customer obsession completely independently. I didn't look at it and say, oh, here's an interest. And I was again, validated by this idea. What is Day One? Well, Day One says, Bezos says, the moment that we are Day 2 in our organization, that's when it all starts to go to hell. So how do you live like every day is Day One? What is Day One? Day One is what you were saying. It's the hunger. It's the passion. It's never forgetting where you've come from. It's humility. It's the true entrepreneurial spirit. And we forget that Procter, Gamble, they were people. They were people. They were actual people, and they get abbreviated, TBWA. All of these companies that end up with abbreviations, each abbreviation, each letter stood for a person. And it's that fighting spirit. If you can somehow figure out how to keep that spirit alive, even when that person has passed on, those are the companies that keep their heads above water.
Love that. Love that. Let me change lanes a little. Before we move to this next thing that I want to discuss, you mentioned Corona TV, and I am really enjoying what you are doing with Corona TV and some of the episodes. You've had amazing conversations. Of course, my favorite ones are with common friends that we have with like Mitch and Chris. But how did you started doing Corona TV? It's you started doing it during the pandemic, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is a show that was born in a global pandemic, but not defined by it. That's how I positioned it. I was in South Africa visiting my mom. She hasn't been well over the last 4.5 years, so I've been going back to see her, and thankfully she's doing well even through the pandemic. And I was giving a presentation because I always try and do some work while I'm there. And the phone rings 10 minutes before I'm meant to go on stage. It's my wife. This is March 11th, telling me that she has COVID. Very early in the process. No one knew exactly what and how. This is the time when, Spain and northern Italy was going, specifically northern Italy. So I fly back the next day. I land in London. I switch on my phone. I see there's a travel ban in place now to New York. But then I read a little bit more, and it's not, obviously citizens can go back. I arrive back in JFK, head home, go straight into quarantine, separate, I was in a separate bedroom from my wife for almost a month, or as I call that, marriage. But within, you didn't expect that, but within a day or two of like arriving, I see, South by Southwest is canceled. All my speaking engagements are canceled. Consulting projects are put on hold. And I can see that, like so many other people, my whole professional life has just been blown up. And I don't even know what the spark was, but I decide I'm not very active on Facebook, at least back in March. I decided to do a Facebook Live just to like experiment with a live stream. Hey, this is what's going on. I've just arrived, back from South Africa. How are you guys doing? And I see a few hundred views. And then I do it again the next day. And then I do it again the next day. And then 4 or 5 days later, I go for a COVID test, and I film that as well, and a lot of views. And then at the time, I'm aware of Zoom, and I decide to like experiment by doing the show, not a show, it's not even a show yet, but using Zoom. And one thing leads to another, and Corona TV is born. And then I discovered this platform called StreamYard, which has changed my life. And now suddenly I'm doing a show every day at that point. I talk to my sister who's in London. She has a spinning studio, and she's talking about how basically, they're going to lockdown. She has to shut her doors. And I'll never forget a quote. She said, I knew that if I shut my doors, I would shut them for good. So I wasn't prepared to close, at least figuratively. So she puts all her bikes on on a truck, calls up all her customers, sends them an email, who wants a bike? They all want the bike. She starts experiment with Vimeo and Instagram Live, and she pivots her business. So I say to her, why don't you come on my show and be my guest, and tell your story. She was my first guest. She was my first guest back on March 29th. And I'm looking at the list today. I had Chris Brogan's co-host, Kerry O'Shea Gorgone. Kerry was guest number 165. And, wow. It's just been, talk about, starting a race, and you're in sixth gear, like your foot is just flat on the accelerator. And it has literally changed my life. And I realized through this process that this is what I was put on this earth to do, to be a show host, to be a talk show or variety host. This is my calling. And how crazy is it? And by the way, the fact that, on Friday's show, I've got Mark Schaefer and David Meerman Scott, the ability to actually now have all of these people at the same time. The other day you saw it was Mark Schaefer, Bruce Turkel, Mike Lipkin, and Mitch Joel. Mm-hmm. It has been a joy. It has given me purpose. And now basically I'm just 2021. This is my priority.
Wow. I love what you're saying. And I have to double click on a couple of things right there because it's amazing. The first thing that I want to double click on is the importance of having the ability, I would say it's a skill, to pivot. And so you've been making a living as a consultant, as a public speaker, as an author, and suddenly your very livelihood changes completely. Like everything that pays the bills stops. And this happened to a lot of public speakers and a lot of coaches and consultants around the world. Not everyone had the ability or the skill to pivot and do something new and think on their feet. But one thing that I want to double click on is, that discovery phase that you went through, discovering or understanding Zoom and StreamYard. And one would think that, when we hear names like yours or Mitch's or Chris or, Brian's and Mark Schaefer, everyone, that you're familiarized with all of the things that are going on at the same time. And it's not necessarily true. We are all learning all of the time. I think that's one of the most important skills that we have to integrate into our lives, the ability to keep learning and discovering stuff. So that's something that I also want to double click on. And the other thing is how you were able to pivot by uniting three elements, if I understood you correctly. Number one, that using your network and your experience and your knowledge, then your curiosity, using your curiosity and hunger to understand new platforms, and then just willing to give it a try and being vulnerable and just putting yourself out there.
To say the three things, because I was taking notes as well. So number three, number three is basically just do it. Right?
Exactly.
Number two is curiosity. And number one was, I think you said knowledge.
Your knowledge, your experience, and your network.
Well, okay. So let's talk about those three things, and then I will double click on your double clicks and respond. So first of all, I'm gonna comment on all three, and in ways that might be a little unexpected. So first of all, Corona TV is not about me. And if you look at my backgrounds, my virtual backgrounds, they're always about my guest. I didn't want, a lot of people will have their books in the background and it's fine. Like, I don't judge. It's okay if you want to promote yourself. You should promote yourself. But I wanted the show to be about my guest. And like one of the things I've even said, and it's come on the show, which is don't tell me you're smart. Just be smart. Don't tell me you're kind. Be kind. Don't tell me you're truthful. Just be truthful. I'm trying to demonstrate that by committing to my guest and committing to my show. The only thing that is really about me is the soliloquy, the little 3-minute monologue at the beginning. And that is strategic and deliberate as well, to remind people that I still know a thing or two about a thing or two. The second, and I'll get back to curiosity in a moment. The second, regarding the network, you're right. This doesn't, a lot of people have asked me, how do you get your guests and how do you leverage this? Well, yes, of course, my network has been huge in terms of getting these people, but oftentimes I will say to my guests, can you recommend someone, or who would you recommend? Because, and by the way, you don't even have to vet them in front of me. You know, if you've been on the show, you know me, this is your social currency. I'm putting my principles into practice by talking about referrals, flipping the funnel, right? That's all I'm doing. So now, if you think about the network effect, everything that we know to be true, if I've had 200 guests at the end of the year, each one of them surely is, knows 3 to 5 really great people. And for them to recommend those people, are you going to recommend someone that you don't trust, someone you think is uninspiring, someone that's going to underdeliver,
right,
so that, Joseph calls you up and says, what the hell? Why did you recommend that person? They were a complete dud. So that's how I've used my network in a way, and the knowledge part. Now, the curiosity. One of the things that happened very early on in the process was my wife listens to all my shows, and she told me that I'm a guest today, so I'm talking a lot. You would want me to talk a lot. But she told me that I spoke way too much. She told me that I wasn't listening enough, and my questions were too long. And I've changed so much so that people started saying, you know what's so great about you, Joe? You're a great listener. And I almost actually choked, because I'm the world's worst listener, at least coming into this. So what I've started to learn how to do is how to listen. The thing about listening is that, and I mean, people listening to this are going to smile at this because it's such a human truth, which is, how many times are you talking to someone and all you're doing is formulating your question in your mind? You're already thinking of what you're going to ask or say. When you do that, you're not actually listening. And so I don't have questions on my show. I listen, and then I come up with a question on the spot based on because I don't know what you're going to say. If I did, then I would come up with all my questions. And then, the third one about just doing it, I'll tell you something. This is street smarts versus book smarts. This is about gut and intuition that trumps logic. In fact, I had a guest on my show who said, your gut, your intuition, it's generally right. And it's generally a physical feeling. Maybe it's a goosebump or a tingle on your arm, or that weird feeling in your stomach. That's your gut. Your gut is your body's visceral physical reaction to something that's getting you excited. But what happens afterwards is your head starts to then come in and second guess, and my concerns are, and let's do the research, and what's the ROI, and basically tries to talk you out of just doing it. So the 3 things you picked up on, to me, are very, very astute and accurate. And I'll tell you, throughout this process, a weird thing. I haven't even updated my website since the pandemic hit. I never set out to be the world's greatest virtual speaker. I never even attempted to become a virtual speaker. I don't want to be a virtual speaker. I want to be a physical speaker. I want to travel again when the time is right. I want to be in front of humans. I'm a social animal. And right now, I'm getting the social connection through talking to you right now. We are, as David Meerman Scott would say, we are 4 feet apart right now. We are close. In fact, if you were in front of me right now, we could literally, touch each other. We could give each other a hug. That is about as intimate as you're ever going to get. But that was my deliberate decision, which is, I don't want to give webinars, with all due respect. I want to do Corona TV. I want to teach, and I want to speak. And when the time is right, I will be on that stage again.
I feel you. I listen to you, and I identify myself with everything that you've said. I'm also looking forward to just being able to, be in front of people again and just engaging in that way. It's so amazing. Like when you get to, when that you are sowing a seed of knowledge or change or just curiosity in an audience, it's an amazing feeling.
But I want to say one thing, that I at the same time, I am a huge believer. I don't believe it, I know it, I feel it, that there will be the new normal will be nothing will not be business as usual. I'm sure you've heard this from many people you've spoken to. So the hybrid model for teaching, the hybrid model for speaking, all of this will become the new normal. And
absolutely,
one of the things that I love is, if I'm giving, just like the event I did for Google or whatever the case may be, if I'm speaking in front of 1,000 people, why not get into a studio, record that keynote, edit out the ums, edit out the mistakes, make sure that there's no technology issues, that everything is playing perfectly and seamlessly, add in extra cuts or B-roll or whatever the case may be. And then 24 hours before the conference begins, that keynote is made available to all participants. But Joseph Jaffe now is not standing on stage giving that presentation. Now I'll still be on stage, but a keynote conversation with the host or with a moderator where we talk about the presentation, where people can actually ask real questions and we can have a real conversation. In education, they call it the flipped classroom. It existed before COVID, that all the lessons were taking place at home and all the homework now is taking place in the class. So that is what I want to see in the conference and speaking world, where we're still absolutely meeting in person and having, our tequila and our sangrita and being social because we're social animals, but we're not in this old antiquated form of I'm the big head on stage talking one to many. To me, we don't need that anymore.
Antes de continuar con este episodio, déjame platicarte que Entre Mentores DLC es presentado por Ricolto Café, una empresa 100% mexicana que desde hace 20 años ha llevado la experiencia del mejor café gourmet de México a miles de oficinas en este país. Hoy, Ricolto Café llega también hasta nuestros hogares a través de su nueva tienda en línea. Puedes conocerlo mejor y hacer tu pedido de cosecha especial de Veracruz, mi favorito, o de Chiapas en grano o molido en ricoltocafé.com.mx. Eso es Ricolto con K de kilo. Visita ya ricoltocafé.com.mx y lleva el mejor café de México hasta tu hogar con Ricolto Café. Let me change lanes again. Earlier in the episode, you shared with us your story about the many changes that you went through in your decision process when you were starting your career, when you first started going to college, and you did many changes. And then with Corona TV, you share with us that you kind of also found a new passion or even a new purpose doing Corona TV, which it's pretty great. So rediscovering these new facets, it's always amazing. It's a great feeling, just discovering yourself doing something new and making new decisions and just feeling that curiosity that we're discussing, and also just doing stuff and just daring to do stuff. Now, the upside to that is that you get to discover and learn and experience a lot of things. The downside might be that we are always open to making some mistakes. So with all of the ups and downs in your career and in your life, with everything that you've done, all the choices that you've made and all the adventures that you've had, if Doc Brown would show up at your door with the DeLorean, see, I have my DeLorean right here. If Doc Brown were to show up at your door and hand you the keys to the DeLorean, would you take them, and to what point in time would you travel to? To the past, to the future, and to do what?
Oh, it's a great question. The thing so funny about what I wrote about today, you never want to really go if I went back in time, it would just be to invest all my money in Amazon, Netflix, Google, Apple, and then I would come back. And then in my villa, we'd be doing the same show, except I'd be in my villa, the virtual background, but no. The funny thing that it's crazy. I keep referencing what I wrote about, what I spoke about today. You never live your life and never should live your life in regret. For me, the one thing that I will be prepared to admit to you and to say, if only I hadn't done this, ... it would have been giving up Jaffe Juice, the podcast. And at the time when I had the juice, right, Jaffe Juice, when my podcast was as popular as it was, my blog was, the engagement was there, I took it for granted. I was complacent. I took my eyes off the prize. I got distracted, and I let a beautiful thing go. Why do I mention it now? Is because there is no regret. It has helped me to make sure that I don't make the same mistake again with Corona TV. The saying, of course, right? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So the thing about wisdom, right? Wisdom, as you know, is all about experience and learning. And often, if there is adversity and resilience built in, you actually end up coming out stronger on the other end. So for me, it's less about, well, if only I had done, and that, if, right? We can always second guess ourselves, and we can never change the past. So going back in that DeLorean is a worthless, fruitless exercise, because if you doubt that, you'll doubt yourself throughout your life. And so for me, it's all about the learnings, and that's why. And the if you did really press me to give you an answer, the only answer I would give you would be a personal one. It would have nothing to do with business. It would have to do with, my father died when I was 4 years old in 1975. It would be that kind of change. It would be being able to try and prevent him from dying, or being able to see him again. And those are the different kinds of priorities now that I think 2020 has helped us with. And I want to say one more thing, which is, I said this the other day. It's a weird thought, but I pity people who have jobs in 2020, corporate jobs. And I'll explain what I mean, because out of context, that'll be like, what are you talking about? I wish I had a job. I wish I had a check. But it's this idea of I fear that so many people that had high paying jobs, that work from home, from their big homes, that have access to great healthcare, that were not affected by this because they didn't have to venture out like our first responders and essential workers. They will come out of 2020 to 2021 and it will be business as usual. And I don't know that they would have learned or grown or been affected the way that most of the world has. And so that's what I mean when I say I pity them, because, the one thing you learn through this process, the one thing I've learned through my career, even through this wonderful conversation with you today, is that everything that happens for a reason. Everything that happens was meant to be. You just don't always realize it at the time.
We've been talking about learning and experiencing things, and you're gonna celebrate your 50th birthday in a few days, right?
Yeah,
in a week's time, if I understood correctly, December 24th. I'll be sending you a note.
Thank you.
Of course. With everything, all the experiences that you've lived, and all these learnings, and what's even happening today, I hold the premise that every leader, to be a productive a productive leader, you have to integrate a series of habits and routines into your life that allow you to do the things that you do so well. So what habits and what routines have you as a leader integrated into your life, and which have you changed in the last 12 months or 10 months since the whole quarantine started?
Well, it's funny because people have spoken about the COVID-19 as in putting on 19 pounds. Like they call it here, I think the freshman 15, which is on average when you go to college, you put on 15 pounds. I've done the COVID minus 19, so I've lost just over 20 pounds. And one of the ways that I did that was through running, through staying physically fit, which in turn helped me be mentally fit and mentally healthy as well. I worked out that I ran maybe more in the first 4 months of the pandemic than I drove, believe it or not. I covered more distance running. And unfortunately, I got injured at the beginning of September, just wear and tear and strain, and I haven't done any exercise since. So I'm trying to get back into that routine, but that was important for me leading up to September. Of course, I've exercised and before, but not as regimented as this. And what was amazing about it is whenever I run, I listen to podcasts. So I listen to Howard Stern and Tim Ferriss and marketing podcasts. And so I would run and I would be feeding my body, but I would also be feeding my brain at the same time. And I got so inspired by all of these stories. It allowed me to, this was my research, my life research, in addition to my business research, which is Corona TV. The other ritual for me, there are other like little mini rituals, like, whether it's a cup of coffee in the morning, but for me, Corona TV has been an Uber ritual, and it's not just every single day, but it's the checklist, the mental checklist. It's the, all right, start the show. And with the show comes the StreamYard join link, which now I have to put into the Google Doc, but also the links on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube. And then I've got to create my Twitter post. And then, so the routine, and this is one of the most important, you've asked one of the most important questions, because the thing that saves you from a mental health standpoint is the routine. For many people, watching Corona TV is part of their routine. And it's what's helped save them, which is knowing every day at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time is another episode of Corona TV, and then the Zoom after show, starts at 1. And so it works two ways, right? You can live your own routine, and you can actually create a routine that other people are a part of too. But that has consumed me in the best possible way. And I haven't grown tired of it yet.
Good. I think that what you're doing with Corona TV, it's really great, and the caliber of the guests that you have, the caliber of the conversations that you're having. I think that it's something that a lot of folks out there can really not only enjoy but really use. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you for the compliment. One thing I wrote, either in Life After the 30-Second Spot or Join the Conversation, I think it was in the first book, I wrote, production is the new consumption. And what I actually spoke about is, I said, when you're producing content, you are actually consuming that content as well. What you're not consuming is other people's content and media. So if you think about it, in a day where, going back to the 30-second spot, where television advertising is nothing more than wallpaper right now, music, people are on their phones while watching TV, if they're even, if the ads are even on at all. When you are producing content, you are all in, you are just focusing on that, but you are consuming at the same time. You're not just consuming the experience, whether it's from editing or talking to someone, but also you're learning.
Absolutely.
And so one of the things is I have stayed mentally, I don't mean mental health, but even just in terms of intellectually, every day I learn from someone else. Every day I'm inspired by someone else. Sometimes they're, subject matter experts on things like surprise or happiness or optimism or, curiosity. And other times it might just be an old friend reconnecting where we uncover, an insight. For example, your three-pronged approach of knowledge, and network curiosity and just do it. And that is, to me, that is my ultimate ritual. I'll say I had James Rollins, who's my favorite author, on the show. Like, to me, that was one of my highlights. He's like, literally, I've read every one of his books. And he says, I won't go into the whole insight, but he said, there are two pieces of advice he gives, especially for writers. Number one is write every day, every single day. And when you're writing, for him, it's 5 pages, double spaced. For others, it might be 3 pages, but especially if you're writing a book, every day write. Stephen King gives the same advice. For me, every day I write a seated soliloquy. The other thing is, he said, which I'm not doing a good job of, he said, every night read. So just like if every day you read, every day you write 5 pages, every night you should read 5 pages. And again, the ability to do that from a disciplined, standpoint every day of your life, those are the kinds of habits and rituals that will separate the winners from the losers.
I couldn't agree with you more. I like to say that as you keep learning, as long as you keep learning, you keep growing. And the day that you stop learning, you stop growing. And the day you stop growing, you start dying. Easy as that. So yeah. I think it's something that I agree with you. It's something that I also try to do every single day.
And I think that actually is attributed something similar to Einstein. He said when we stop learning, we start dying. And he actually, this comes from the Walter Isaacson biography of Einstein. He wrote the book on Steve Jobs. He said that basically, that Einstein died like pretty much with a pen in his hand, still scribbling just one more thought, one more idea, just one more piece of creativity. It's a different way to think about your life, and a life of meaning, and a life of purpose, a life of productivity, and a life doing what you love.
I love that. Joe, I want to be really respectful of your time, and we're pretty much out of time for the show. But I do want, before I move on to the last question, which will connect with purpose precisely, before we move on to that, where can people connect with you?
The show is coronatv.show or jaffejuice.tv. Both point to the same YouTube channel where people can subscribe to the show. That to me is the greatest gift that they could provide me for my 50th birthday. I have a newsletter that people can subscribe to as well. But probably the best way is, Joseph Jaffe, if you want to see what a website looks like before the pandemic that doesn't mention virtual speakers, josephjaffe.com is my website. But I'm still, at Jaffe Juice on Twitter, on Instagram. I'm very findable, and I'm very, very accessible too. I will tell you, and I'm saying this so people listening, is I will never, ever refuse, and I never have in my entire career refused a single podcast interview ever. And I never will. So if you want to find me, I will be found. The only thing I will say to people is I suck, because we all suck at something. I suck at a lot of things. I suck at responding to people on email. So if you don't get the response you want from me, just keep responding to me. I mean, keep emailing me until eventually I succumb.
Very good. Very good. But I'm pretty sure folks who are listening will start emailing you as well. So, Joe, the whole premise of this show is also to share how leaders like you do in their lives, to transform the day-to-day stuff into extraordinary things. So how do you, Joseph Jaffe, transform the day-to-day into something extraordinary?
How do you transform the day-to-day into something extraordinary? I mean, it's a beautiful question. And I think the answer is just be open, just be open, be present, be in the moment, instead of worrying about the next email, the next appointment, the next Zoom. It's to really see things as they are and celebrate them as they are, and find those moments, because they're just all around us. This is, we live in this constant state of amazement and wonder and awe if we choose to live that life, if we choose to be open to it. I find that the ability to transcend the ordinary, the ability, to be extraordinary, everything comes from a spark, an idea, everything, humble beginnings. That's how, the spark becomes a flame, becomes a raging fire. And so that's what I would say to people, which is, if we've learned anything from this year, it's slow down enough to be able to see things as they are and see things as they could be, and then figure out how to speed up afterwards. But that would be my response.
Thank you very much for that, Joe. Before we say goodbye, I just want to acknowledge the amazing work that you're doing, and thank you for allowing us to learn every day through your work, through Corona TV, through your books, and everything that you've been doing in the last 20 or more years. So thank you for that. I really admire what you're doing. I take my hat off to you, sir. Thank you very much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you.
I want to also thank you for the opportunity to reconnect with you after all this time. It's been, I don't know this for a fact, but I've probably created more content in 2020 than in my entire career combined leading up to 2020. I mean, every week, 7.5 hours of content, which if you actually translate it into words, I was trying to do the math the other day, it's probably 50 books, never mind 5 books. And one of the things I'll be working on for next year is a new keynote called How I Reinvented Myself During a Global Pandemic, and you can too. What I'm determined to do is to share the story, but more importantly is to encourage people, whether they have a job or don't have a job, to follow the same path and make it very easy for them to tell them all the secrets, all the tips, remove all barriers and obstacles and impediments to just doing it and being able to create something meaningful.
That's great. I really look forward to seeing that keynote. I look forward to that.
In Mexico City, maybe. You never know.
Yeah. But we have to talk to the IAV and start getting that ball rolling. Joe, thank you very much, really, for joining me and sharing all your thoughts and learnings. I really appreciate it. So I look forward to seeing you soon.
You're very welcome. I look forward to seeing you too. Take care.
Take care, my friend. Thank you very much. Y muchísimas gracias a todos ustedes por acompañarnos en este episodio de Entre Mentores DLC. Recuerden, este es un programa semanal, así es que si no lo han hecho ya, suscríbanse al mismo y compartan este y todos los episodios de Entre Mentores DLC, porque estoy seguro que entre sus amigos, familiares y colegas hay por lo menos una persona que se puede beneficiar muchísimo de las lecciones y consejos que grandes líderes como Joseph hoy aquí nos están compartiendo. Gracias también, como todos los días, a Ricolto Café, el mejor café de México, por acompañarme en esta aventura de vida todos los días. Yo soy Efraín Mendicuti y esto es Entre Mentores DLC. Hasta la próxima.